Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So this is the introduction of the speaker today. She is Mrs. Soumya Sri Kumar. She works for Leap Years Center for Children with Special Needs. She helped them design and execute the academic curriculum for children, and she counseled the parents, couples, families, and children who require the same. She has been in field of mental health after graduating from National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore from 1993. She has held teaching positions briefly in schools of social work and departments of social work in hospitals, St. John's Hospitals, Bangalore. She started her academic profile is Masters in Social Work and MPhil in Psychiatry Social Work, NIMANS, Bangalore, Postgraduate Diploma in Counseling, Postgraduate Diploma in Special Education. Her interests are reading fiction and non-fiction, writing blogs, academic writing, embroidery, and stitching. And presenting Mrs. Soumya Sri Kumar. Ma'am, you can start.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Indu. Thank you, Mrs. Viji. Thank you, Lagom School, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you all about behavior. Okay.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt you. One small request with all the participants, please go on mute, everyone. And if you anything you want to say, you can use the chat box. It will be addressed. If not, after the webinar, definitely we will get back to you. Thank you for your cooperation in advance. Yes, ma'am, you can continue.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Indu. Behavior management in children. Okay. We have had an overwhelming response for this program. I understand, correct, Dr. Indu?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah.
We have very good participants here. Number of participants.
So this must be really a burning issue for many people. And it is a everyday occurrence in every household which has a child. Very often we hear or we ourselves say, oh my God, yesterday I was embarrassed. My child rolled on the floor and she wanted Kinder Joy. I didn't know what to do. Or we say, my daughter, oh, I wish I didn't have to go home and fight with my daughter to finish her homework. Or yesterday it was a bad day. I fought with my husband. We had made a special dinner we couldn't have because, you know, the issue was we were fighting over our daughter lying to the school teacher. So if you are one of them, don't feel bad. Believe me, it is, I would say, is a normal occurrence. If it doesn't happen, then, you know, there is something wrong. This happens because you are a parent, and be proud that you are a parent of a child. Okay, so in this presentation, I will be saying, using the term parent because it was actually we had started the initiative for the parents, and we have included other special educators and professionals into the gamut. And we are, by parent, I don't mean only a parent. It is an overgeneralized term for any adult or a caregiver who is working with a child. So how this talk is going to go is like this. So initially I will be describing as to what is behavior. After that we will be going to understanding the traditional approaches which have been postulated in behavior. Then how do you manage behavior, and how do you develop positive behavior. So for the teachers, there will be a last section as to how you will also have a positive classrooms and positive children behavior in the classrooms. So this whole presentation is envisaged for about 45 minutes to 50 minutes, after which I will be addressing a couple of repeated questions which you have sent through your Google Forms. And then the floor will be open for questions which can be, you know, addressed in the chat box, and Dr. Indu could, you know, share the pressing concerns. So whatever is possible within this time frame, we will address, and anybody can get in touch with me through email, and your queries will be answered. So let's start with the presentation. So what is behavior? This, we all keep saying, you know, don't behave this way. You know, she has bad behavior. So behavior is, I think, the next word which is most used after my child. And sometimes it is used not in the appropriate sense, it is misused also. So what is this behavior? Any reaction to a particular situation or a stimulus can be said to be behavior. So a stimulus is there, and how you respond to it is a behavior. So what is new about this? Every day we are responding to 101 situations and we are behaving. So there is nothing new about it. But for example, you take the situation that your child doesn't come out. Now, actually, because of this lockdown, all these situations are not there. The school bus will come. Your child does not come out of the bathroom. And then, you know, you are very tense. So you keep shouting. So the situation is the child not coming out of the bathroom. And the response you are giving is calling out for the child. And your response of calling out to the child is a stimulus for the child. The child gets irritated. So the cycle of stimulus response keeps on going from one situation to another. So is behavior not happening at any time? Behavior is always happening. And most often what we do is we equate behavior to bad behavior. Nobody says, oh, that girl has good behavior. So the very fact that, you know, the poster for this particular thing was a child which was not depicted in a very nice way, shows that behavior generally is taken as in a negative connotation, which it is not so. And all behaviors are learned. So when we learn behaviors, why do we follow certain behaviors and why don't we follow other behaviors? Why certain behaviors continue? Why, you know, certain behaviors extinguish? So to understand that, we need to understand some of the theories of learning and behavior. So I'm not going to go very theoretically into the theories. I will just make it as simple as possible. So Skinner's operant conditioning was Pavlov and Skinner were the pioneers to work on behavior, and some of their theories are still followed in many instances. So there is a lot of relevance to these theories. Skinner's operant conditioning, those of you parents who have a child on the spectrum would have heard of ABA. ABA therapy is based on Skinner's operant conditioning. It is not only ABA therapy which is based on it. Every parent and every child uses this operant conditioning with their children. Let me give you an example. A teacher who gives a smiley face or a star for the child who has done well in his class is following operant conditioning. He is positively reinforcing the child who has shown appropriate behavior in terms of his writing work or reading work. So a mother who is very happy that the child quickly, without tantrum, finished, you know, the homework, says, come, let's go to the park and have an ice cream. So again, you are positively reinforcing the child. So these reinforcers which are positive are said to increase, positive reinforcers are said to increase more positive behaviors in the child. Whereas punishment is supposed to reduce the negative behaviors in the child. Whether it happens or not depends, it varies according to the situations. More often it doesn't happen. When you punish the child or you give a consequence, it doesn't result in positive behavior. It is supposed to, yes, according to Skinner, it is supposed to, but it doesn't happen. And you as parents or teachers will be a better judge of what I have said. So this reinforcement theory, every act can be reinforced, or you could use reinforcements, you know, in a discrete intervals, or you could say, you know, at the end of the week we will give. So how do you use reinforcers? Mainly you first start with reinforcing every activity, and then you say, like, you know, every sheet, let us take the example of worksheet. Every worksheet you do, you give a star. And then it is, you finish the bunch of worksheets, you get a star. and then it is like you finish for the week, you get a star. So you kind of fade the reinforcement slowly until the desired behavior is gone. So positive reinforcements for very, very small children could be very concrete, like, primary reinforcers like chocolate, biscuit, or something to eat, stars, tokens, smiley faces. And as the child grows, the reinforcers cannot be so very rudimentary. It has to appeal to the child. So it can be more social reinforcers, wherein the parents praise the child, he is being rewarded, he is being praised, the finishing the task gets him appropriate grades, or even the task per se will intrinsically motivate him. If he likes that particular task, he will be able to better perform it. So this is how reinforcement works, and if you use the reinforcements appropriately, you will be getting definitely a change in behavior. Whether the change in behavior is sustained is a question, but definitely the change in behavior will happen. Now, there were certain people who said, people are not just, there is a stimulus and there is a response, human beings can also think. So the thought process also mediates the way they behave. So Piaget, as a developmental psychologist, is one of the pioneers who said that there were a lot of schemas developed in the brain, wherein each particular schema stores particular information, and based on this information, the child acts. Okay, it may sound very complicated. I will put it very simply. A small 3-year-old child sees the grandmother looking for her spectacles. So she says, no, Aji, the spectacle is here. I will get it for you. So when she finds his spectacles and gives it to the grandmother praises her. So another instant, this schema is stored in the child's brain. So the next time the grandfather searches for his newspaper and the child helps the grandfather find the newspaper. And then, she helps somebody else find something. So these schemas of, helping people are positively reinforced, is stored in the brain, and then that makes her to behave in certain particular fashion. So here comes the importance of this cognitive theory, is that consistency. If for a particular behavior, I am responded by a particular way in the environment, gets stored in my brain. So if it is everybody reacts to it in the same way, then my behavior is conditioned and I also behave in particular way. But when there are discrepancies, then there is an inconsistency. And so because of this inconsistency, I am not able to understand whether I have to behave in this particular manner or in that particular manner. Okay, again, how do we explain consistency? Okay, today Amma has a meeting. Okay, let's take now a few situations in the lockdown. So she has a situation, she is in a conference call. So Amma says, today you can watch TV now till I finish the call. Or she gives me one of the iPad and says, you watch YouTube on the iPad, it is okay. So then tomorrow Amma does not have a call and Amma says, no, you cannot watch YouTube. Too much of screen time is wrong for you. Okay, so the small child is not able to understand that there is a discrepancy in the behavior of Amma today. Yesterday she behaved in certain way and today she is behaving in certain way. Whether watching YouTube is correct or watching YouTube is wrong. So there is a conflict in the behavioral management. Next comes modeling, the theory of modeling. So then there were many people who said, it is not only the child, the environment also. The child is not a passive person. He actively looks at the people around him and he learns. So there comes the role models in the family. So we see these theories I am explaining as to why it is relevant for behavioral management. So I have models in my environment who do not practice what they preach. Suppose my dad says I have to watch half an hour TV and he watches soaps on the TV for about 3 hours, then whom will I believe? Why should I watch half an hour and Appa can watch 3 hours? The question starts coming. Okay. The Appa may say, okay, I was a child, my father didn't allow me, there was no TV at that time. So many shows were not there. Okay, but that doesn't, explain the behavior to the child. Okay, now we are going to summarize in a nutshell as to the relevance of the theories we have studied. So the first is every behavior, there is a consequence. If a positive consequence happens, then positive behaviors are more. If there is punishment, it reduces negative behavior. The consequences for every behavior have to be consistent, and good role models have to be present in the child's environment for positive behaviors to come. So now let us go to managing challenging behavior. Okay, so because it is behavioral management, we have understood that what is behavior and how behaviors can be maintained. Now we are going to managing challenging behavior. So here, in a challenging behavior, you usually see what is the particular behavior. What is the behavior we objectively see? Behavior serves a purpose for the child. It may be to avoid tasks or to express his frustration. Let us take various examples to understand this. See, I have made the presentation fully with examples for parents and teachers because it will be easy for you to relate to such situations. Okay, here let us take the small child who's throwing a tantrum. 2.5 to 3-year-old child. Yeah, we will see one example outside and one example inside. So the child is rolling on the floor because he wants something, a chocolate or a lollipop. The mom is refusing to get this. So the behavior is the tantrum, the child rolling. So what happened before the behavior occurs? The child wanted the lollipop. The mom took the lollipop away from the child's hand and she put it back. So what happened afterwards? The child is very angry. He is refusing to come from the shop and there is a lot of resistance. So what the mother does, there are two options. Either the mother can just, physically carry the child and distract the child and move away, or she can yield into and get him the lollipop. So the mother yields, gets the lollipop. So the next day, again and again the child goes. The child knows, okay, first the child will ask, can I get the lollipop? Can I get the box of crayons? Can I get this book? So when the mom says yes, there is no problem because there's goodness of it. The mother agrees, the child agrees. But when there is no, then there is a discrepancy and then the child throws a tantrum. And then if the mother yields to the tantrum, this forms a behavior pattern and then it continues. Okay. So here the antecedent for the behavior, for the particular behavior will be the mother saying no, and the behavior will be the tantrum for the child, and the consequences will be the mother getting the particular object which the child desires. Now let us see another example, the same. Let's take a lockdown example. The child is very, very lonely. She is missing her particular friend who is just across in the apartment. She wants to go and play with the child. But that particular family now is not willing to admit anybody else because there are aged grandparents. But for this particular child, she knows her friend is there and she is not able to play with that particular friend. So this is very, very upsetting to this particular child. So she screams, she throws a tantrum, she goes near the door, main entrance door, and she is just rolling on the floor and crying. Okay, so the mother at this particular situation can yield. She can call that family and ask, request, but she knows that they are not going to budge. So what will she do? She can try, distract the child through whatever, usually children at that age get distracted after some time, ignore the child, let her cry for some time and come out of this whole thing. So usually when there is a tantrum, what you do is you just ignore the child, or if the child is getting violent, you put the child in between your knees and the child faces forward. Something like this child who's looking at you in the slide. He faces forward, he doesn't look at your face, and you don't talk to the child until the whole tantrum subsides. So the body will heave, the child will cry, the child will kick, the child will, pummel, want to get out, scream. So you just hold the two hands, you just hold the two legs in between your knees, and you just keep there 5 minutes. The child will cry out the tantrum, all the emotions will get out, and the child will become calmer. Then you do not bargain, you do not say anything, and then you just put the child to sleep, or then you continue with the target. So as you do not yield to the temper tantrums, the child learns that crying and throwing will not yield results. So now let us see this for about 6 or a 7-year-old. The same child going to a supermarket wants DOMS color pencils. DOMS have attractive 20 color pencils, 30 color pencils, new color pencils have come. So the mother says, yes, you have so much of stationery at home, everywhere it is there. But the child is very, very persuasive. She says, the sapphire green pencil color in this particular DOMS is not available. And I don't have this color pencil, so I need it. So, but the mother is very firm, and because yesterday she's had a very long talk with her husband, or she has made the talk with her husband that come a lockdown, finances, there is a crunch in finances, we are not going to spend unnecessarily. So what happens? She tells no. This particular child is not able to regulate the emotions. She gives her mother part 1 in the shop. So what the situation is, more than the hitting, the mother loses face before all the other people in the particular shop. So the mother either can get the color pencils for the child, or she can just stoically walk, bill all the products. Anyhow the girl will follow. The girl is not going to be in the shop. So she will follow behind her and then come home. After coming home, it is not that, you cannot keep on shouting at the child till you reach home saying that, what you did was wrong, what you did. You just have to just stoically just keep quiet, completely ignore the child. After coming home, once the child is settled down, probably in the night, you just tell the child that what she did was wrong. You will be explaining to her that her action is wrong, but she is not a bad child. You cannot say, you are very bad, you hit me. Okay, that gives a very, very different meaning to the child, wherein, it makes her feel very guilty, and the child starts getting a negative self-esteem about himself or herself. You have to say that whatever action you did was wrong, but you do not pass judgments about the particular child, whether she is good, whether she can be loved, whether she will not be loved. If you do all things like this, we as mothers say, no, I will not love you. Next time, I will just leave you in the shop and come. I will not bring you back. So never pose empty threats which you will never be able to carry out. If the more you make empty threats with the child is never going to believe whatever, she cannot trust your words, whether it is for positive or it is for negative. So don't pose empty threats. Don't say challenges which you cannot carry out. You have to, talk only about that particular behavior and not about all the other things. Even some people I have seen parents who come for counseling, they'll say, inke khandani aisi hai. The whole family is like that. They will not listen. So how relevant it is going to be for the child, whether somebody else is behaving. Here we are addressing a particular behavior. So when you say that, okay, the child will understand, okay, everybody is like that. No. So I can also be like that. So whenever we are addressing the behavior, we just talk about the particular behavior, the consequences for the particular behavior. You could probably say, see, I didn't like this action. I was very hurt. So as a result of it, for the next 2 consecutive weeks, I am not going to take you to the supermarket. So that will be an ideal consequence, and you need to carry it out. When you say you're not going to take the child on a particular trip, you should carry out that you are not going to take for 2 weeks, and the third week you will take her. That is how behavior, it involves a lot of energy from the person who is handling the behavior. For a lot of people, behavior, yes, there are ups and downs, but somehow it goes. But for certain children, it is very, very tough. And the particular caregiver or the teacher has also to be very consistent in enforcing behavior schedules. Okay, now let us look at a scenario in the schools. Okay, there is a particular child. He is very, very, very disruptive in the class. Okay, he distracts everybody, passes chits, shares jokes, passes on jokes, and makes comments which make all the other children laugh. And the class environment generally gets very disturbed. So any behavioral policy in a classroom will have to go with the behavioral policy of the school. A particular school should have very clear behavior policies as to when I am having behavior issues, how it is going to be handled. So this particular teacher found it very, very difficult. So she complained to the principal. The principal, what happened was, the principal said, okay, now why is it happening? Why is this child behaving in this particular manner? It was not till 3rd standard he was not doing that. Why is it in 4th standard he is doing something like this? So she was a very inquisitive person. So she said, okay, now we will observe his behavior for 2 weeks in the classroom to see what is it that is happening to the particular child. So what happened was, there was this counselor newly appointed, and nobody knew what was happening. So they said, this new person has come to the school. She wants to observe how the school is happening. So she will be in our class. So this particular person, generally observed everybody, and she wrote comments about everybody, so that this particular child was not singled out. But what happened was, a detailed account of what is happening, in which period his behavior is the peak, all that was noted down. And when you saw the behavior patterns, it turns out this particular child had difficulty in math. So what happens in the math class, he was not able to perform. He hadn't completed his homework. He was not able to answer the questions. And then the teacher was not very sensitive to the child's problem, and generally he was laughed at by all the other classmates. So it was observed that after the math class, the next class, the child was very disruptive, and he used to behave, the maximum disruptive behaviors used to happen. Why was it happening? The child was getting attention from rest of the classmates. Though it was to you and to me, it may be unwanted attention, but for the child, an attention is attention. So when this was found out, what happened was, the child was removed to the resource room for that particular math period, and then he joined the class. And as his performance in math, he was not actually very bad, but somewhere his foundations were not done. He hadn't got the foundations properly. And once they were rectified, by about 6 months, all the negative behaviors in the child slowly started decreasing. Also, a pact was made by the class teacher with the particular child that if he doesn't do all these, he used to, get special treats from the teacher, saying he was a very good student, star badge and all these. So these kind of small positive reinforcement measures got him a lot of positive attention, and this behavior decreased. So this is with respect to behavioral management. So how do you do a functional behavioral assessment? For any behavior, you can do functional behavior assessment. What is the causing behavior? What is the problem behavior? But we always start with the what is the problem behavior, because the problem behavior is very uh, okay. We have finished with the example, and now we are going to see the revision about the functional behavior assessment. What is causing the behavior? What is the problem behavior? And what is the child achieving from this? So the thing which is visible entirely to us first is the what is the problem behavior. So when we see the problem behavior, we go back to what is the causing behavior, and then we see what is the child achieving from this whole thing. So then what do we do? Oh, okay. So now in this particular school class situation, the problem behavior was a child disrupting the class, and the causing was his inability to perform in math. And what was the child achieving in this? He was getting attention. So now how are we going to solve this particular issue? We are going to modify the antecedents. We are going to increase appropriate behavior, and we are going to make problem behaviors ineffective. By modifying the antecedents, what do? I remove the child from the situation, and I'm putting him in, I'm getting him enough help to handle his math. By then what happens? By which, because he is not having this problem with math, he is not put in the stressful situation, we are slowly trying to increase his appropriate behavior with positive reinforcement plans. And then slowly we are going to make his, as these two increase, then with the problem behavior becomes ineffective. For any problem situation at home or in school, you can make this ABC plan, and you can try and see what are the antecedents, what are the consequences for the particular behavior. Usually what happens is, whenever any maladaptive behavior occurs, we jump to the consequences first. So first we will think only of punishment. We don't think of, what is the antecedents. So if we have a complete picture as a teacher or a parent, we will slowly realize, what is the thing which is happening. So we take a 2-minute break, wherein, you can just, if you have a piece of paper, you can take a particular behavior, see what is the particular behavior, what could be the antecedents. You just think about it, antecedents, and how you could make the problem behaviors ineffective. So we just take a minute to do this, and then we will go back to the presentation. Okay, shall we continue? Okay, so now we have the antecedents, the behavior, and the consequences. Okay, so you may all say, like, we are very busy. How can, for every behavior, how can we manage the antecedents? How can we see what is the consequence? But we can, yes, it is difficult. We are all busy. As a teacher, we have a class of 40. As a parent, we do have, lot of other responsibilities, at home because of this COVID. But I would suggest that, though it may sound very laborious, if you could keep a log or a diary and observe, it would be very fruitful for you in the long run. Okay, so this is all with respect to behavioral management. A behavior occurs, I solve the problem. Fever comes, I treat the fever. But how am I going to prevent that the child not getting fever? How am I going to make a healthy, resilient child? How am I going to make a child who has positive behaviors throughout his life? How am I going to make somebody who can face failures, who can cope with positive and negative things in life? That is where positive behavioral development comes. Okay, I would feel that, yes, effective behavioral management means that we are not only stopping a bad behavior or promoting a good one, but also we are teaching skills and nurturing the connections in our child's brains that will help them make better decisions and handle themselves in the future. Okay, so that brings the question, why do we have to do it at home? Where do the children usually misbehave a lot? The children misbehave a lot mainly at home because they have that security as to whatever behavior or whatever they want to test, they can test it at home. So that home is such a secure place for them to try out new things. That is why they, have the maximum behavioral issues at home, and they behave quite well in school, except for a few people who do have issues there also. But we need to find out why these issues are pervasive. Okay, so now if you see, how do we bring about this positive behavioral development? Uh, this positive behavioral development is kind of a whole brain approach. When we say the whole brain approach, I personally like this approach, so I do follow this approach with my children. As the child grows, initially, if you see the child in the infancy or the toddlerhood, it is a terrible twos, you say. There is a lot of temper tantrums. But as the child goes into the preschool period, slowly the tantrums fade away based on the reinforcement patterns and consistency at home, and the child is fairly well. And again, these issues come in during the teenage a lot. Why does this happen? Developmentally, if you observe that the child's brain as a toddler, the emotional areas where regulation takes place are not very well developed. So they slowly start developing, and so the concept of self-esteem start coming around the preschool age. So once the child starts feeling very nice about itself, there are not much issues. Again, the self-esteem issues are threatened in the teenage. That is when you get a lot of uh, behavioral and emotional problems. There's a lot of defying and things happen. So this, what does it lead to it? So if there is an emotional connectivity between the person who is handling the child and the child, to a large extent, positive behavioral development is possible. Okay, so how are we going to do that? The question we ask is, why is a particular development, why is a particular behavior happening? Okay, it could be equated to the antecedents. Why is it happening, and what am I going to do for this particular behavior? What is the behavior I'm seeing, and how am I going to resolve it? So these are very, very simple questions. It's a very logical approach, because any problem we are going to solve, why is the problem occurring? What is the problem, and how am I going to resolve? So we use the same model for behavior also. So now we don't have to, ma'am spoke about antecedents, behavior, consequences. So you can be, less easy thing for you if you look at this model. Why is the particular behavior happening? What is the particular behavior and how am I going to solve it? Okay. Let us see a small example to see, how to understand this why, what, how paradigm. In this why, what, how paradigm, the main tenet is the emotional relationship which you establish with the child. You have to emotionally connect to the child to bring about behavioral management. Unless that emotional connectivity is there, you cannot nurture and develop well-balanced children who go out and be resilient to tackle issues in the world. So this lockdown has necessitated everything online. Okay, so I am a special educator. I do online classes for a group of kids. So this particular day, one of the kids, it was a session, the child hadn't come online. So I messaged the mother, and the mother is switching on the iPad after my message, and there is a drama unfolding in the house. The child is lying, on his stomach on the sofa, and he's abusing and yelling at the mother. He's very angry, you can say, from his tone, and he's calling the mother by her name, saying, Mrs. So and so, I hate you, I don't want to do anything with you. So this is the drama. I said, here I am, with all worksheets. Now the online classes have started, first curriculum, I have to make adaptation, and I'm there, all bunch of worksheets sent to the mother, printouts taken, everything ready. I'm ready to do the class. But this is the situation. Will the class happen in this situation? I do not know why the child is upset. All I know is the child is very upset. So I already know this child, and I know how he functions. In this particular behavioral mode, I know he is not going to study. So but he somewhere that bond is there, so he gets up from the sofa, he comes and sits before me, and then he tells me, he turns the camera to his mother and says, you take class for Mrs. So and so, I'm not going to be in your class. So I know this child is very intelligent, and you cannot reason with him when he's like that. So I laterally say, today I didn't plan for any class. I just planned a few games. So should I play those games with your mother? So then, he perks up. He says, okay, we are going to only play games. We're not going to do worksheets. I said, no, we are not going to do worksheets. We're just going to play games. So he says, okay, I'm ready to play games. So we plays animal thing and all that. And certain things he doesn't know. So a child is a child. So he tells his mother, see, I need to know what is an animal in A. Okay, for that alone, we are friends. After that, I will become angry again. So he does all this. He plays, and then we play a spelling game. At the end of the session, he says, we will not, can we play for some more time? Do you really have to go? And all that. So then at the end of it, I took the liberty to ask him, why is it that you were very angry? He says, no, see, I didn't do anything. First of all, my mother shouts at me to get up. There is a class. And then she says, where did you keep the iPad? You're always like this. You keep the iPad anywhere and everywhere. Yesterday, I didn't take the iPad. It was my mother who was having the iPad in her hand. Why is she shouting at me? How do you think I will feel? Okay, fair enough. The child's feelings of being yelled at and abused are fair enough. So I said, yeah, I can understand. You must be feeling very bad. So at that juncture, we will now leave what has happened between the child and the mother. See, between me and the child, because I understood that this child was not very happy, I completely had to change the module for the particular class that day. So if I did not have an emotional connectivity with the child, it will not be possible. So behavioral management becomes very easy if you have that emotional connectivity with a particular child. That doesn't mean the child will has to completely go away. You know, you're not being completely lenient with the child. You have to say, you have to dictate the boundaries within which the child can operate. See, if I would have to leave the child, I would have had to tell him, no, it's okay, you don't want to have the class today, you go. So the next day, he knows that if he throws a tantrum, he will not have a class. But I changed the strategy. We had the class and we had it in a syllabus only, but only the modus operandi was different. So that is how you need to manage emotions. The emotions at that particular cataclysmic time, instead of punishing the child, you have to redirect the emotions, reorient, regulate the emotions to get positive behaviors. This is both a science and an art. By science, I mean you have to know the principles of how behavior happens, and an art wherein you have to devise your own strategies. At that particular time, nobody is going to tell you, come sit with you and tell you, you can do it this way, you cannot do it this way. Nobody is going to guide you and take you through this whole process of why, what, and how. But as you start doing, this why, what, and how will become a part and parcel of your daily life. Okay, now let us use the same module for the homework issue, homework scenario. There is this particular your child who's 11-year-old or 10-year-old who is not doing homework, and this lockdown is very convenient because the teacher is not going to check the homework. I think, you know, as parents and special educators, I think we need to bring a statute where, you know, all the homework assignments will carry 50% of the grades for this year. You know, some certain things, if only when enforced, the children will start doing their notes. Otherwise, there is a lot of resistance in writing notes by the children. So the algebra homework is not done. You have been telling the child for 5 days to do the homework. The class is over. The next class is going to come next week, and the homework is not done. So you are getting very angry, and you say, you know, how many times to yell at you, and this is going on. But if you just take a step back and use this why, what, how, and see, think without making any assumptions about your child, with some compassion, with some curiosity, if you make what could be the possible scenarios why your child is not doing the homework. Yes, he could be lazy. He could take his parents and teachers for granted. He could genuinely not know. See, algebra is something, if you teach online, it's going to be really difficult to follow for the first time to a child where algebra is being introduced. So that could be one of the options. He could be bored. He could dislike algebra. So if you sit and think, you will get n number of scenarios where which could be the possible options of why the child is not doing. So when you have these options, half your problem is you start reorienting your thinking. And then when you get the child, you seat him and you say, okay, now come, let's do the homework. Don't give a big lecture. You know, when you call the child, if you're going to say, oh, you really need lesson in time management. How many times I've told you, you have to plan. See, when you start the whole thing with all these tirades, nobody would want to come. So even the little bit of motivation which I have, you know, 0.1% motivation will also go. So you just call the child and say, come, let's finish this homework and get it off with so that both of us can play something else. Or both of us can watch a movie. And then, you know, that is a motivator for the child. The child will come and sit with you. And when the child comes and sits with you and he starts doing, you will know whether he has genuine difficulty in algebra or he is bored or he is just lazy, he is not doing. So the answers will come to you. And based on that, you can say, like, you know, how you are going to handle. If the child doesn't know algebra, if he knows and he is bored, okay, the job is done. If he doesn't know, then how are you going to teach him? So there another big homework disaster averted. Again, this question of why a particular behavior is happening is very relevant to us as special educators. So this why answers a big question of what is the basic difficulty the child has. Does the child have difficulties in attention? Does the child have difficulties in social communication? Is that because of which she is having problems? Does the child have difficulty in, say, learning? Does the child have dyslexia? So these are the questions, why questions. If we answer, then the what question becomes very easy, and then the how question can be easily handled. There is still a lot of reluctance among parents and people to get their child assessed. See, assessment, yes, gives you a label. We have also been, in those days, like 25 years back, the labeling has been a big issue with mental illness. So you are mental means gone. So we have also gone through these negative labels of mental illness, which are not so serious now. People do come out and say that they have depression, they have schizophrenia, they have so many illnesses. Yes, putting the child in label, in particular labels, sometimes has disadvantages in school situations when you go and tell the labels. But if you do not want to disclose to the schools, also, at least for your own sake, please get the child assessed if you feel that the child has a problem. If you know where the problem lies in a particular child, it is very, very easy to help the child to come out of it. Because at least you know the compass I have to use. I have to go in the northern direction, or I have to go in the southern direction. But without that, the compass is there. You do not know which direction to turn. And you're going everywhere, and you will be going in literally in circles. Okay, this is a plea to parents. It is not that I advocate diagnostic labeling. I don't even want a diagnostic label. I just want you to find out which is the area in which your child has more difficulty. Is it sensory? Is it social? Is it attention? Is it executive functions? If you know that, then it gives you a better direction to work. That is an aside point. So when you have positive behavioral development, when you help your child to develop positive behaviors, then there is a better emotional regulation. The child is able to regulate his anger, his need for gratification, immediate gratification. He is able to control himself. Yes, he may get angry. He may want to break things, but he is able to channelize his behavior. He is able to come and tell you. So the main thing as parents you need to do is you need to listen to your child. By listening is not half an ear. You need to sit and look at both the verbal and the non-verbal part of it and understand the child. Okay, now I am really running out of time. Okay, now this is the portion for the teachers, wherein as teachers and special educators, all this which we have talked also is very, very relevant for you, because you have to understand why, what, and how to help a particular child. But there are certain things which we quickly go through, are teacher factors which help in better classroom behavior compliance. But the first one is good bonding with the children. Every child in your class, you should know the child individually. See, there have been studies in the West which show, a teacher greeting the child, a teacher being present in the class before the child and greet every child by its name, and share one small aspect of the child's day with it. It increases the bonding, and it increases better behavioral compliance in the classroom. You just say, good morning, Aditya, or good morning, Aditi. And then, did you have breakfast? How was your school trip? Was it good? There were also some teachers, what they do is, they just give out slips in the morning, and then each child can be told to draw the emotions that the child is feeling and give it back to the teacher. So by which the teacher knows whether the child is happy or something has upset, whether the child is angry. So the basic four common emotions through emojis can immediately indicate to the teacher what is the mood state of the particular child. This is another exercise which the child, initially the teacher, beginning of an academic year, can carry out to know the general disposition of the children. So use of praise. You have to use a lot of positive reinforcement in the class. Praise for the child, even the smallest minuscule thing which you can find good about a particular child, you need to use to praise the particular child. I had one child who was coming to me for remedials. He had severe issues in many things. But what was very nice about this child is that despite all the difficulties, he was a very pleasing and very well behaved child. So one day he came and told me, I like my English master a lot. Ma'am, and I know I have many difficulties. My handwriting is not nice. I make so many spelling mistakes. And then, what happened is I can't write one sentence without mistake. But, still he finds something to appreciate about me. He says, this particular idea which you said was very nice. So that particular characteristic of the teacher, he finding something to praise in me makes me attend his class. The next is happy. You should have happy classrooms. How do you have happy classrooms? You generally classrooms, you should have very clear, simple rules, establish clear routines. The instructions should be very clearly given. For children who cannot or follow instructions immediately, who need repetition of instructions, you can make instruction placards and pin it on the notice board and ask them to look at it instead of repeating the instruction again and again. Frequent use of praise in the classroom. Then complex tasks should be broken down into simpler ones. Use of interesting activities for all the children. See, if as a teacher, if you get the pulse of a class, you will know whether the particular class wants more action-oriented activities or they want more story-oriented activities, you will know. And so you will make your, that comes next as the classroom content should be interesting. See, if the classroom, it is up to us as teachers how we want to make the content very interesting. There have been history teachers who have taught history through treasure hunts also. So that is how interesting you can make the class if you really set out to doing it. So the classroom, however interesting the classes, better behavioral management is possible. Nobody, if it is very interesting, you will not have pin drop silence and you will not see anybody moving from their place. You need to have effective teaching methods which cater to all the sensory modalities, visual, auditory, kinesthetic and tactile, and which comply to all the intelligence of the different multiple intelligences of the child. Then always have a positive view of the child. Though you know this child has a lot of behavioral issues, he creates a lot of ruckus in the class. Always do not make derogatory remarks which will, which will damage the self-esteem of the child. Whatever minuscule strength that the child has, build on the child's strengths and do not say, okay, he has these limitations, I cannot work. So try working. You accept the child as he is. When you accept the child as he is, working with the child will become more easier. Then there are some child factors also which increase classroom behavior compliance. These are complementary factors to the teacher factors. If the child has a very good relationship with the teacher, then the child will have better motivation to come to school and better motivation to study. He will participate actively in the class. He will feel that he is one. Okay, he has certain issues, but if he is made part of the group, definitely that be feeling and belonging will be there among them, and he will start feeling, once he feels that he is a part of the class, his inappropriate behavior also will come down. There are some other, I can share certain articles with your teachers if you are interested, certain models which are practiced abroad, practices in the class for positive reinforcement schedules, like, you have Every time the child shows positive behavior, whoever shows, the teacher gives out a piece of paper or a label wherein the child's name is written, and it is put in a box. And at the end of the box, they have a lucky draw, and whichever child's name is picked up, the child gets a special gift. Okay, so this what it shows is the more number of positive behaviors I follow, then the more number of times I have the chance of being get picked up and getting the gift. And there are, positive classrooms wherein, certain behaviors are accepted by the teacher and the children at the beginning of the year. Time is spent on to establish clear rules and what behavior is expected, and the class is divided into teams, and there is a lot of peer control over the people who are having disruptive behaviors. So there is a lot of peer pressure that your team has to win. So if your team has to win, what has to happen? So these kind of lots of activities you can be very innovative and introduce in your class, and create positive experiences in the classroom. At the end of the day, no child should go home feeling that he had a bad day. And if he had a bad day, every day can't be the same. You need to make sure that the child goes smiling. Talk to the child. This particular child had a bad day. Sit, talk to him, make him feel pressure, make him feel that he's not alone. Give him a small token. So the teacher has to be one who has these small mystery gifts hidden, and they do come out for special occasions. And then you have to manage emotional issues as and when uh, it pops up in the classroom situation. So we'll quickly run happy classrooms. In the happy classrooms, you teach for success so that all children succeed and nobody fails. You teach effectively. And as a teacher, you have good self-regulation and management. You are able to manage your anger. You are able to manage your emotions. You increase the motivation of the children, and you improve class cohesion. And as happy parents, you take time to understand your child. You emotionally connect with the child. You focus on prevention of the undesired behavior. You consistently use behavior strategies. You modify behavior strategies based on results. You try something, it doesn't work, then you go back and you modify. You do not threaten children with things which you cannot carry out, and you do not verbally and physically abuse children. Okay, so with this, I have come to the end of my presentation. Okay, so now either we can go back to the questions which came in the Google Forms, or we can answer questions which have come up today.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt. This is the few questions most of the parents have asked in Google Doc when asked for registration. So they want to know, like, regarding the attention, how to sustain attention. Can you just tell us?
Yeah. See, attention difficulties usually arise in everybody. Okay, now just take the example of me. I started preparing for this presentation, but there are no more number of things which we are preoccupied with. Your attention keeps going here and there. But you as an adult, you know that you have to come back to this particular thing, and you start working on whatever is the goal which have we achieved. But with our children, it is not like that. There are certain kids who really have problems with attention. There are certain kids who have it as a secondary problem to certain things. But whatever the reason may be, I have just listed some strategies for sustained attention based on this repeated seeing this question asked. See, the thing is, this is a very short time for me to address all the issues. Like, but I have been given a positive, response from the organizers saying that, we could continue this with specific issues if need be according to what the parents need. So, but general strategies for sustained attention, we have to first seat the child in a calm environment. When you want to do, these are certain things, if you follow, you get better results. You remove possible distractions. I'm sorry. You remove possible distractions from the table. Suppose you keep a sharpener, you keep a pencil, then you will feel them fidgeting. He will sharpen, sharpen, sharpen. He will go 10 times to the dustbin. He will put it, he'll bring it back, and then the point will break, and the cycle repeats. So remove possible distractions from the table. Whatever he needs for the particular task, please keep it available for him. Pencils, rubbers, pens, sharpeners, or no sharpener, all sharpened, neatly available for his need. Keep the tasks, plan the task. Okay, suppose he has, most of these children who do not have sustained attention will have a lot of incomplete homework and classwork. Okay, so the minute my amount of work is voluminous, I would not even start, because I know I'm not going to finish. I can't see the end of it. It is like an ocean. So you plan, break the whole thing into manageable tasks. You say you're going to do only so much today. So when you see that the end of the task is there, and these, when they do not have attention span, they wouldn't want to work for more number of time. So plan small motor breaks in between them. Keep the task stimulating and not repetitive. These are the children who wouldn't want to write the answer, the same answer 3 times, the same spelling 5 times to practice. Okay, the minute you tell them to do such activities, you have lost. So you need, if you have to teach spelling to them, you need to find out creative strategies to teach them. It has to be, for example, uh, I have this for the ADHD children. I have this strategy called blackout. I tell them to pick out 5 spellings which are very, very hard, biggest spellings. Okay, and they have to write it down. Why the biggest spelling is, when you start striking out, the game goes like this. You pick up randomly alphabets, and then those alphabets in the words will be struck out. So if your words are not big, and if your not words do not have a number of letters, there is a huge chance that you will become blackout very soon. So this makes them, write, they will all search for all the biggest words in the particular lesson, like germination, reproduction, agriculture, irrigation, and they will put down. So, the whatever tasks you are doing, you have to make it very, very stimulating, and there should be no repetitive same tasks, because repetitive tasks are mundane, boring. Everyday tasks are very boring for them, and they will not do it. You have to tell the child what is expected of him. Give clear instructions as to what has to happen. Yes, the instructions will be there, but you again have to reinforce that this is what has to be done. The answer has to be written. So like that, you have to give very, very specific instructions, clear, concise, and very, very, very specific. Make him repeat the instructions to find out whether he has really listened to you, because you may be saying and he may be thinking, daydreaming and thinking about something else. It is not that he is doing purposely, it is the nature of the way his brain functions. Okay, so
Thank you, ma'am. And
yeah,
the
no,
second most
one more
asked,
thing, Indu.
yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Okay, before you do this, I have found this very, very helpful with all my children. You can ask him to do a small piece of coloring. Okay, uh, like a mandala. You can even download readily available mandala sheets and make him color for 5 to 7 minutes before he or she starts the activity. Uh, what happens is, they doing that brings them to the here and now of the particular class. I do not know how it happens, but the children themselves have told me, the day I do not have a mandala ready, they say, no, how will I come get focus? I didn't tell them that it was for the focus, but they will say, no, only when I do that I get focus. So this is one thing. I have found it very effective with my children. You can try. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Another most asked question is emotional regulation with children?
Yeah, we have done that. No, social emotional regulation is what we did. Why, what, how.
Okay. Okay, ma'am.
A lot of
Uh,
it we have covered. So
okay.
the parents can, yeah, the social emotional regulation. People who really have difficulty can do the why, what, how,
Mm-hmm.
and get back to me
Okay.
individually. If they have difficulty, I will help them out.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And the most addressed one at this time is gadget addiction.
That is again.
So, can you please help all of us?
Yeah. See, okay. Gadget use. Okay, a boon or a bane. This debate is going to be eternal, and we do not. It is a boon and it is a bane. Okay. Gadget can be used in moderation. According to the American Pediatric Association, it is not advisable to use gadgets with children less than 18 months. Less than 18 months, children should not be, exposed to gadgets. 18 to 24 months, they can see the screens occasionally with the parents. 2 to 5 years, it is 1 hour per day. And children above 6 years should use it with consistent use with the parents. Okay, all viewing of any content should be done with parental supervision. As long the child should not view any content without the parent being present. Okay, so now I am not going to say my views about this, but rather I would bring about the views of the enhanced services for uh, utilization of technology. What is that H here? I forgot. Harmful use of technology. Sorry. NIMHANS services for harmful use of technology. Clinic guidelines are this. You have to, you cannot ban technology from children. Encourage use of appropriate use of technology. Teach the advantages of technology. Teach them to protect their privacy online from a very young age. Restrict screen time to 30 minutes before bedtime. Do not allow them to see. You can even keep it 1 hour before bedtime. Please don't allow them, because it does affect the sleep cycles. Do not create too much fear about technology. You just say, no, technology is very bad. If you use internet, people will spy on you and all that. Because the children today have to use technology, and now it has become so much so that their classrooms are done in that. So we have to teach them to use it appropriately and not get very scared about it. Do not ever use technology as a bargaining chip. You do the homework, I will give you iPad. No. Okay, don't use that. Family members also should use technology appropriately. Indiscriminate use of technology. Actually, the person who is in charge of it says watching more than 2 episodes of soap is screen addiction, according to him. The guideline says, but we all binge watch, correct? So help the children to cope healthily with emotional pressures. Another thing which they say is, if they are very, very frustrated otherwise, they go to technology to find a release there. So appropriate handling emotional pressures will help them to come down on technology use. What are the warning signs for parents? Decline in academic activities, very irritable and angry when not gaming and using devices, lying about the amount of time spent on it to friends and family, increased time in online activities. It is the same as any other addiction, wherein you lie, cheat, you distort the truth to get back to the particular addiction. But okay, when you see the warning signs, what do you have to do as parents? The first thing, don't get alarmed, don't get panicked. Okay, do not immediately stop complete use of technology, because that will send everybody into panic mode. Negotiate balanced use of technology. You start making things. See, we now what we do, even games we play in online, even quiz we do it in online. So all that we can slowly cut down, and we can start doing, get proper board games, spend time as family together. We think, you know The current generation thinks that, if they do everything online, you do not have to have physically all those board games. It's such a bother. Where will you keep them? Where will you store? No. See, the amount of screen time as it is very high because classes are happening, extra tuitions are happening online. So restrict otherwise recreational use also in the through technology. Play games and indulge in outdoor activities with the child. That you can do after the coronavirus. Early identification and intervention is helpful. If the child is not able to stop, seek help. Like after you try all this for a couple of months, still the child is very irritable, he's not able to sleep. No, he is very anxious, very anxious, very jittery. It's something like, somebody who has withdrawal from alcohol, how he'll behave. Very erratic, very impulsive, throws things, then immediately you should seek psychiatrist help.
Okay, ma'am. And
Okay.
the other one is most addressed is temper tantrums.
Okay. What happened? Am I visible?
You are visible, ma'am.
Okay. I oh, temper tantrums.
Yes, ma'am.
We did do some portion about temper tantrums. Yes. See, it is the temper tantrums usually is between the 2 and the 3 years of age. Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
It's called the terrible twos. But it doesn't kind of stop at terrible twos. It slowly, fades away by about 3.5, 4. So what happens in a temper tantrum? The child is not able to regulate his emotions. When you say no, he wants something, he wants something. He's not able to regulate, he's not able to control. So what do you do for this whole thing is you actually the best way is to prevent a tantrum from working. Any behavior management doesn't even arise when the behavior doesn't occur. So that is where the positive regulation of emotions happens. Usually, if you see temper tantrums occur more when the child's routine is disturbed, when the child does not eat at the particular time he has to eat, when the child does not sleep when the child he has to sleep, when he doesn't do potty when he has to do. Okay, if as parents, young parents, if we make a note of this particular pattern, most of it will be 99%, it will be true. See, we go out, the child's sleep schedules the child doesn't want to sleep because he doesn't want to miss out on anything important which the parents are going through. Okay, so he will push being sleep until and unless he falls asleep on his own. But how does that falling sleep happens? He becomes cranky before that. He wants certain things which when not given to him, he throws a tantrum. So most of it, when the schedules are upset, these tantrums happen. Okay, the schedules are all fine, but still we are going somewhere, and the child wants something, tantrum appears. So you try and divert. If you're not able to do it, there is no harm in saying no to the child. Yes, he creates a scene. He creates a scene. He is small. You can pick him up. You can hug him. You can bring him out of the shop. Correct. So do not yield to the tantrum unless you want to really yes, you want to get the particular thing for the child, but do not give it to the child when the child is throwing that. That is what I'm trying to tell you. It is not that you should not give what the child asks for you. You should not give it when the child is throwing it. You can give it at other times. Okay, when a child is behaving nice, oh, we come, let's read this book. You wanted to read this book. No, Mama has got this book, shall we read? But when the child is throwing a tantrum, when you give the book, then the pattern of, if I cry, I will get something, gets reinforced. Okay, so this is one important thing. And most of the tantrums in slightly elder kids, if you can manage to ignore it, please ignore it. You do not talk to the child when the child is throwing a tantrum. Completely ignore. If the child is not harming himself, just ignore the child. Do not bargain with the child. Do not, keep on shouting when the child is throwing a tantrum. No, you have to stop it. You have to stop it. No, just ignore. After some time, the child will subside. When he comes to you, you talk to him. Would you like to drink a glass of water? You want to think, and then talk to the child as to. Then the child himself will tell you why he was having such a bad tantrum, or he will tell you certain things which will give you hint. So again, the question is, you have to emotionally relate to your child. Understand your child. If you understand your child, half your behavioral difficulties are solved. You may think, yes, I today, if you have listened to the presentation, hopefully I have not put you to sleep during the whole thing. I have not given any wisdom. It is all you know. It is only how you apply the same which matters. So it is only you emotionally connect. My key word is emotionally connect your child, and then half your problems are solved. So, how do you emotionally connect your child? Listen to your child wholeheartedly. It is not with half attention. Complete attention, you listen to your child. You will know the answers are all there. You may not believe me, you try it out. If it doesn't work, you can ask me. Then I will rework my thought process. That's how we learn.
Learn and unlearn.
Yeah, learn and unlearn.
Yes, ma'am. There is one last question.
Yes, yes.
Ms. Anuradha has asked, what happens when children are exposed more for TV?
The same thing as screen time only applies for that also.
Mhm.
Screen is for TV also, ma. The services for harmful use of technology says it's iPad, computer, TV, everything. Any screen devices, phone, everything is the same. The child can become more irritable. You may not fall asleep. There will be attention problems may come. He may not be able to focus. He may get restless when that particular time is not given. It's the same principle.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah.
Anything else?
Ma'am, another question is that how to manage a single child, how to take care of social behavior. He is too attached to mother and does not like to mingle with children.
Okay. See, this child, does he have any other issues? Only then we can answer.
They have not said anything, ma'am. This is from Shweta
Yeah.
Sriram. She
Okay.
has told
So,
manage a single child. I
yeah.
mean,
See, now the single child. Okay. No, thank you, Shweta. See, single child has become kind of a norm nowadays. Okay, very few families have two or more number of kids. Predominantly, if you see, at least 70% of the families now have only single children. How do you develop social behavior in the child? Is you have to take him to situations, social situations, which is going to be now immediately very difficult. Uh, the other thing is, Shweta, if you can connect with me, I will go work you through whether he has any anxiety regarding to social situations. Why does he? Usually, children are very social. They would want to mingle with others. Has he had, why does he feel very anxious to go away from the mother? Is what we need to explore in this paradigm. Okay. So, if there are no issues, then what if he doesn't feel anxious? Then we have to slowly take him step by step into the social situations and make him like you will be there at the back where he plays with the children, and slowly then how old is he?
Miss Shweta, can you just type
Tell
it?
me
How
how
old
old
is the child?
is he? Because if it's a toddler, then it is highly acceptable.
6 years, ma'am.
Okay, so this is the age where peer relationships are kind of established, and it is a little surprising that he does not want to mingle with the thing. So we need to. The only thing is anything you have to slowly introduce it. take him to, his friends, on a friend's house, and a date. You can talk to one of the friends' mothers, that this is a problem. So you can slowly, in the protective environment, expose him to social situations, and then remove your protective umbrella and make him do it on his own. If further you want specific help, you can always write to me. I'll help you through it. Yeah, I saw another question on chat now.
Yes, ma'am. Shall I help you? My
Yeah.
son is 8-year-old boy. He was very obedient and listening to instructions of parents properly. But now in 8 years, he gives back answers, feels offended if scolded in privacy too. He asks in return to fight with him. Please advise, ma'am.
You have to fight with him, is it?
Yeah, he
See,
asks, it seems. He asks in
mm.
return to fight with him.
See, back answering, I would say it is actually normal. Okay. Reena, if he doesn't back answer, if he just listens to what all you say, then where is his individuality coming? But you should think about what is the reason for his back answer. That is, again, you need to go and connect with him. You have to look at the whole situation from his perspective. You will get the answer. So then you will be able to answer, understand why he is doing, and modify your responses according to him. A child, actually, the child needs to creatively express himself.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, will you be able to take some more questions?
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, it is from Hemambika. She's asking why few parents have complaints that their children are not obeying them, why they became rulers in the family, in a family.
The children are the rulers in the family, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, that is
Complaint
because you have given the ruling to them. A simple reason. So, just jokes apart. See, again, effective management of children is an art and a science. So you need to, look at whether there are any inconsistencies in the parenting. Okay. Usually, when children rule, it is you say something and the other person in the family say something. It need not be your husband, it can be even your in laws. Sometimes it happens. Okay. Whatever you say, your authority will be undermined by some other family member. So there is this constant struggle for the child. The child slowly, children are very intelligent. They will manipulate one against the other and they will become rulers. It's not that they have any malicious intent. It is only for them to serve their own purpose. That's all. So you need to see where in the behavioral understanding is the problem. Whether the consistency is the problem, or the modeling is the problem, or whether reinforcement schedule is the problem. And then if you apply the paradigm of why is this behavior occurring, what am I going to do, and how I am going to solve this, probably you may need to get into confidence the other family members, if there are any, and then you can, in a matter of time, you can change the whole paradigm. See, most of us, what we feel is when we say no to our children, we feel guilty. See, we have to understand that we can say no to our children. It is not that we need to say yes every time with our children. So when we say no to the children learn to regulate their emotions in a safe environment of the family. And so when the no comes outside, there are very few, drastic decisions taken by the child. I hope I have answered your question.
Okay, ma'am,
Make the
one
child
last.
virtual class is always on the go. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. You can tell me if you have. Yes, if the class is interesting, the child will sit. Okay. It is for the teacher. Okay. See, it is for the teacher to make the class interesting. And it is very difficult for the teacher to make a virtual class cater to 40 children. And the teacher is also new to this whole thing. And suppose if a child is a little fidgety, okay, and he is not able to sit in a particular thing, he will know that there is no structure. So what you can start doing is, first of all, you can make a particular place allotted to him for the class. Okay, it is okay if you have to get him a small desk. I do not know how big he is. Since he is running around, I assume he is small. So you get a small table and desk for his, yeah, 10 years, correct. So you get a desk, a designated place for his class, like how his school is going to be. Okay, because the time is designated and the class time is designated, and he cannot move from the place until the class is over. So first you bring that structure into the particular schedule. So this is his class school desk, and he is going to sit here. Whatever it is